In January 1914, at Ford's Highland Park plant in Michigan, Henry Ford announced a $5 day that could nearly double the standard factory wage. But the payment was not simply an act of generosity. It was designed to confront Ford's labor crisis, protect expanding production, and impose a new relationship between the company and the people who worked inside it. The news moved through tired families like a sudden promise of rescue. $5 could mean rent paid on time, food purchased without credit, and a chance to escape the constant fear of layoffs. For immigrant workers and their households, the increase represented real security. Yet the offer came with conditions, investigations, and rules, revealing a hard calculation about power, profit, and control. Ford's factories were growing quickly, but workers were leaving almost as quickly as they arrived. In the years before 1914, Highland Park struggled with severe turnover as the company expanded its Model T production. Ford had to keep recruiting and training replacements, while industrial jobs demanded long hours, repetitive motions, strict supervision, and adjustment to increasingly precise production schedules. Every departure cost Ford money and slowed production. The problem was not simply low pay. The work itself was exhausting, and a worker who could no longer endure the pressure could walk away, leaving the company to rebuild the position around someone new. Training consumed time, errors disrupted output, and constant replacement threatened the reliability Ford needed to sell millions of standardized cars. Inside Highland Park, production was divided into small, repeated actions. One person might attach the same component again and again, while the unfinished Model T moved onward without waiting for that worker's individual rhythm. By 1913, Ford's moving assembly line had transformed automobile manufacturing, reducing the time required to assemble a car from more than 12 hours to roughly 93 minutes. That famous breakthrough carried a quieter human fear. A mistake could hold up the line, a moment of fatigue could become visible to supervisors and coworkers, and a worker no longer controlled the pace of the job. Speed had become part of the machinery. Human bodies had to adjust to a schedule set by belts, conveyors, timed stations, and the demand for uninterrupted output. Before the moving line, workers could walk around a car and take part in several stages of its construction. Ford's system changed that arrangement. The car traveled from station to station, while each worker handled one narrow task. The method simplified training, but it also reduced skill, variety, and personal control over the working day. Production became faster because movement was planned and repeated. But every delay now stood out. If one worker fell behind, the slowdown could spread through the line, turning a private moment of exhaustion into a problem measured in lost seconds, incomplete cars, and disrupted schedules. The system made efficiency visible, but it also made individual weakness costly. That made the $5 wage both a labor breakthrough and a calculated gamble. Ford could afford to pay more if the new system produced cars quickly enough, but the plan would fail if workers kept walking away from the line. The payment also included a profit-sharing element and was tied to standards enforced by Ford's Sociological department, which examined workers' domestic lives and personal conduct. The unsettling truth was that Ford was not only raising wages, the company was buying stability, speed, and a more dependable workforce. The money looked like mercy, but it also helped bind workers to an industrial system that demanded more of them than their old pay ever had. Ford's $5 day rewarded endurance while extending corporate authority beyond the factory floor and into the worker's private life. The $5 day was not an unconditional wage handed to every person who entered Ford's factory. The regular wage was lower. The higher total depended on a profit-sharing plan, and Ford tied that extra money to rules about how workers lived outside the plant. A worker's home, family life, and personal habits could all become part of the company's judgment. To qualify, employees were expected to show what Ford considered a proper life. They were supposed to avoid heavy drinking, manage their money carefully, keep a stable home, and support their families in approved ways. The company claimed it was helping workers become secure citizens, but the message was clear. The larger paycheck came with conditions, and those conditions reached far beyond the factory gates. For many families, the promise was powerful. A few extra dollars could pay rent, buy food, settle debts, or make room for a small comfort that had once been impossible. Industrial work was often dangerous and uncertain, so a steady income at Ford could feel like a narrow bridge out of poverty. Behind the wage stood parents trying to keep children fed and households intact. Yet the same paycheck could also become a family bargain made under pressure. A worker might accept exhausting hours because the money protected everyone at home. He might endure the speed of the line because losing the extra pay meant falling behind on rent or going without necessities. Relief and dependence could exist in the same household, tied together by one company's decision. Ford created the Sociological department to enforce this private side of the plan. Its representatives did not study only attendance, skill, or output. They also looked into workers' homes and habits. They visited neighborhoods, gathered information, and judged whether employees were following the company's rules for receiving the higher payment. The department presented this work as guidance, but its power came from inspection. Ford was not simply paying people to build cars. It was trying to shape the lives of the people who built them. The factory's authority followed workers into streets, kitchens, rented rooms, and family decisions that had once belonged to them alone. That pressure changed the meaning of privacy. A worker knew that drinking, spending, cleanliness, marriage, and household choices might affect his income. Even when no inspector was present, the possibility of inspection could remain in the background. The company did not need to watch every moment if workers believed their private lives could be examined later. This did not mean every worker experienced the system in exactly the same way, and the records reveal a policy rather than one single pattern of enforcement. But the broad effect was difficult to miss. Workers were not only selling hours at a machine, they were also being asked to present a certain kind of home life in exchange for the money that made that life more secure. The headline was the $5 day. Beneath it stood a larger machine. Ford joined higher pay to strict discipline, fast production, and a steady supply of low-cost cars. The wage helped draw workers in and encouraged them to stay, while the moving line demanded that they arrive on time, repeat the same task, and keep pace with every station around them. That was the chain at the center of Ford's design. Workers stayed longer, the line became more reliable, cars were produced in greater numbers, and lower prices opened a larger market. The famous wage was real, but it was not separate from the profit system. It was one part of a plan in which human stability helped power industrial speed. The apparent gift carried a second message. Ford offered workers a wage many of them badly needed, but the company also set the behavior required to keep the higher pay. A worker could gain a safer home, better food, and a little room to breathe, while knowing that the same company could decide whether his private life made him worthy of the money. That contradiction made the $5 day powerful. It was not simply a raise, and it was not simply a punishment. It improved lives for many workers, yet tied that improvement to approval from the employer. Relief and control arrived in the same paycheck. The moving assembly line made obedience valuable to Ford because every station depended on the one before it. If one worker slowed down, the delay could spread through the line. If a worker left, the company had to interrupt the process, find someone else, and teach that person the required motion. High wages helped solve that problem. They gave workers a reason to stay in a job that was often tiring and repetitive. But the company did not buy freedom from turnover. It bought a more dependable workforce. The faster the line moved, the more costly resistance, absence, or hesitation became. For the worker, the day could begin with real relief. The money might cover rent, fill a kitchen, or help keep children in school. Yet inside the factory, the body had to follow the same narrow movement again and again, often for hours, under a pace set by machines and supervisors. That created a private conflict that no company report could fully measure. Gratitude could exist beside anger. A worker might feel lucky to have the job and still dread the sound of the line starting each morning. The wage changed what his family could hope for, but the work could consume the strength needed to enjoy it. Ford's larger plan joined wages to mass production. If the company made cars in huge numbers, it could lower the price. If workers earned enough to buy those cars, they could become customers as well as producers. The factory would make more vehicles, pay workers more than many competing employers, sell more cars, and grow even larger. This was presented as a new economic cycle, with workers helping create the goods they might one day own. The idea helped turn the automobile from a luxury for the wealthy into a product aimed at ordinary families. But the cycle depended on more than generosity. It required speed, discipline, low costs, and a workforce that could keep pace. The bargain was built into daily procedure. A job could offer better pay while tracking conduct, measuring output, and leaving little room to slow down. The worker was judged not only by the hours spent at the factory, but also by whether he followed the company's approved way of living. That is what made the $5 day more unsettling than its headline suggested. Modern comfort could be financed by a system that watched, tested, and controlled the people who produced it. The wage opened a door to a better life, But Ford kept his hand on the doorframe. The $5 day changed a worker's income, but it did not give workers power over Ford Motor Company. Ford still controlled the speed of the line, the rules for receiving the extra pay, and the meaning of a good worker. The company decided who was steady, sober, loyal, and worthy of the full reward. The wage was a breakthrough in earnings, but it was not a surrender of control. That limit mattered because the paycheck came with conditions. Ford could raise a family's security while keeping the factory's deepest decisions in the hands of management. The worker gained more money, yet the company gained a stronger claim over his time, conduct, and continued employment. The bargain was generous only on the side Ford chose to measure. What the policy left out was a real voice in the factory. Workers could receive more money without having a say in how fast the line moved, how tasks were assigned, or how complaints were handled. That silence carried its own fear. A worker who depended on Ford's approval had a reason to endure pain, hide anger, and keep moving even when the job was wearing him down. For many families, losing the extra pay could mean losing rent money, food, or a chance to remain in the company's favored neighborhoods. The threat did not need to be spoken every day. It existed inside the rules. A worker could feel grateful for the wage and still understand that gratitude was part of the discipline holding the system together. General Motors offered a different path through the same growing car industry. Under Alfred Sloan, the company built a range of vehicles for different incomes and used changing models, brand divisions, and credit to reach more buyers. Ford pushed one efficient product toward the largest possible market. General Motors built a system that gave customers more choices and made buying a car easier over time. The consequences spread far beyond the men who first collected the extra pay. High wages became part of the argument for mass production, while the idea of workers buying what they made became central to American business. But the lasting lesson was also institutional. In 1937, after years of pressure and conflict, Ford workers won a union contract with the United Auto Workers. The contract gave them a formal voice that the $5 day had never provided. That change revealed the limit of the original promise. Better pay could improve a home without changing who held authority inside the factory. A family might buy better food, clothing, or a car, while the worker remained exposed to the company's rules. The money eased daily hardship, but it did not remove the fear of being judged, watched, or replaced. The human aftermath lived in that contradiction. Workers became part of a new consumer life, yet many paid for it with exhaustion and silence. Their children could grow up with more comfort than their parents had known, while the adults who made that comfort possible carried the strain in their bodies and habits. The deeper aftershock came when the 1914 announcement was remembered as a simple act of generosity. Records from Ford's early wage system show something more complex. A company using pay, surveillance, and production discipline together. By the time the 1937 contract forced Ford to recognize organized labor, the old assumption had been broken. A good wage could bind workers to a company, but it could not permanently replace the need for rights. The $5 day helped build modern prosperity, but it also exposed its hidden price. At Ford's factories, the paycheck promised freedom outside the gates, while the company demanded obedience within them. That was the design at the center of the bargain, not just to pay workers more, but to make the entire system run faster, longer, and with fewer interruptions. On January 5, 1914, at Highland Park, Henry Ford turned a wage announcement into a new model of industrial power. The $5 day changed the belief that low pay was the only path to cheap goods. It showed that a company could pay workers more, demand tighter control, reduce turnover, and create customers for the products those workers made. The lasting aftershock was not simply a bigger paycheck. It was the discovery that labor, production, and buying could be locked into one system. And at the center of that system was a single $5 promise, offered as relief, but carrying the weight of obedience.